It is the Pick 6 2024 NFL Draft Spectacular. We are back. So much to get to. The Packers are picking approximately 4,000 times. We'll break down first-round options. Will there be any trade options out there? Who are some of our favorite prospects? We are going to get to all of that coming up on this draft special edition of the Pick 6. And welcome to the 2024 Draft Spectacular edition of the Pick 6. He is Packers Central writer Jacob Westendorf. I have collected 7 gym badges in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond over the past couple of days. We have so much to get to, ladies and gentlemen. I knew Jacob would like that one. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have so many things to get to. First round, second round, multiple second round picks, multiple third round picks. Who are some of our favorite prospects out there? This is one of my favorite times of year, Jacob. I feel like this year has been almost a little bit different for me in terms of draft expectations and draft anticipation. And we'll get to this a little bit more later in the show, but I almost don't feel like there's a wrong option for Green Bay. Packers are not taking a quarterback. That is not going to happen in the first round. Maybe later in the draft, not in the first round. Okay. Outside of that, I mean, I almost don't think there's a single wrong thing Green Bay could do. Maybe you don't like a certain player or you wish you would have gotten better value at one position versus another. But man, I'm just excited. I feel like there are so many good options for this team. And the bright spot about last year, as we talked about a few weeks ago during our free agency frenzy special edition of the show, that you had no expectations last year. Now you're back into the realm of having expectations. Well, the positivity of that is there are so many different options. There are still so many things the Packers could do to improve their standing going into 2024. And that starts with the NFL draft this week.
Yeah, it does. And this is, Brian Gutekunst. It was interesting. He used the same exact verbiage in his initial press conference as the general manager that he did earlier this week. And that is that this is the lifeblood of the franchise. And it's true. The Packers, I know they signed Xavier McKinney. I know they signed Josh Jacobs, but they're just never going to be Daniel Snyder's version of, the then Washington Redskins, now Washington football, or no, what the hell are they called now? Washington Commanders. They're never going to be that, right? They're never going to be that. Push all the chips into the center and run everything in and just try and make everything to push them over the top. That's just not what they're going to do. And that's partially why they've been as successful as they have been. And we can debate, should they have done, whatever. That's not really what this is for. It's a big week, and this is a big draft class. I've written it several times that if the Packers win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years, obviously 2022 and 2023, those draft classes looked to be top-notch. This will be one of those classes, too, that we're like, okay, that is the one. When they picked 11 players from the national champion Michigan Wolverines that pushed them over the top to win a Super Bowl.
So that took 3.5 minutes. I am impressed. It took a full 3.5 minutes to get to Michigan. Way over.
Yeah, in all seriousness, whoever they pick in this class, that is where we're going to be like, okay, that was the class that got them over the top and into the Super Bowl. Very similarly to the way we look at BJ Raji and Clay Matthews as those building blocks of that 2010 Super Bowl champion team and getting them into the Super Bowl for that year. And really both of those guys were building blocks of some great teams over the course of 2010, 2011, 2012. I mean, there were some really good Packer teams in that time frame. And this Packers team has a chance to be that. The other thing is to push them ahead of, again, I've said this before, I think this team is good, but they also have to prove they are the team that beat the Cowboys and took the Niners to the brink, and not the team that lost to the Giants and the Bucks and got within a field goal of losing to the Carolina Panthers. There are some things this team still needs to prove. And I think Brian Gutekunst has said as much as hey, they got to do it again. We got to add competition to every room, all that stuff. So I'm excited. This is one of my favorite times of the year, and you put so much work in. I don't put half the work in that some of the great guys Dane Brugler and some other people, and I would never try and put myself in that same conversation as some of those people. I don't take myself nearly as seriously as that. But when you put some work into this, it's kind of like the fruition of the fruits of your labor, if you will, to put everything in. And while you're at it, go buy that Green Bay draft guide, guys. We're 24 guides away from 1,000. So that was our goal at the outset here. So we'd like to reach that goal if we can. So if you guys can help a brother out in that way. And I promise I did not mention the Michigan Wolverines once in my any analysis that I did for that draft guide. So if you want proof I can do that, go check it out.
We will get to all sorts of different topics here. We would love to hear from you over the course of the show. We're live. YouTube comments are rolling, and you can also reply on Twitter now. I'm not calling it X because I'm not weird. So I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. You can reply to us and get a comment in there.
Calm down. You are weird, but not I call Twitter X weird.
Yeah, true. Two different levels on the scale there. We would love to hear from you, though. Any prospects you want us to talk about, any guys that you just want the Packers to take, any trade options, send them in the YouTube comments. Our guy Ben asking Austin Booker round 1. There will be a Kansas Jayhawk that comes up on the show. Jacob might be holding back from talking about Michigan. I am not going to hold back because there is actually, for the first time since Gilbert Brown, an actual Packer who would be a good fit for the Green Bay Packers. I love Gravedigger, by the way. Shout out to Gilbert Brown. There is a legitimate former Kansas Jayhawk, though, who would be a good fit for the Green Bay Packers later on after round 1. We'll get to that later on in the show. But let's just start right there, Jacob. Before we get to any of the picks, any of the prospects in particular, what are the biggest needs for this team? Because I do feel like depending on how you view this roster going into next year, how you view the coaching staff, there's a brand new defensive coordinator. Let's not forget about that. Jeff Hafley, first-time defensive coordinator with the Green Bay Packers coming up this year. What is he going to specifically want? What would you say? And I mean, you could say depth at pretty much any spot, and that would include quarterback if you don't like Sean Clifford. Depth everywhere is important, but in terms of positions where there's a legitimate need for help sooner rather than later, what are those big needs? The guys who you hope to get a starter in the first few picks this year.
Offensive line, whether that's guard or tackle, I think either one of those.
Or center.
Even if you believe in Rasheed Walker, I certainly think there's something to that. I personally, Rasheed Walker does not stop me from drafting an offensive tackle at 25, or moving up for, if Olufashanu is going to have a drop, which I've seen some mocks where he's available at like 20. Me personally, I would move up to like 16 if Green Bay had that, to go get him, just for that stalwart left tackle for years to come. Rasheed Walker would not stop me from doing that. And I like Rasheed Walker. I just think that the depth at that position is paramount. You see it all the time too. I mean, the Packers kind of had it happen last year, but not to the level of some others where, a team loses one offensive lineman and the whole operation falls apart. The Packers have some replacing to do on their offensive line. John Runyon, gone. Yosh Nijman, gone. David Bakhtiari, obviously, gone as well. And, that's a lot of snaps, even with Bakhtiari's issues in terms of staying on the field the last couple of years, unfortunately, to replace. Yosh Nijman was a 1.5-year starter and a guy who played their swing tackle role the last couple of years. And John Runyon started a billion games at right guard. And I'm not sure where we got this idea that Sean Ryan is just a solid starter and we can just plug him in and everything's going to be fine. I don't quite understand where that line of thinking came from, but it does exist. It's there. So
go check Twitter during a game. Wait for pressure from the right side and wait for that to pop up on Twitter, right?
Correct. Exactly. That's exactly how that'll work. So offensive line is certainly one. Linebacker, the Packers have 0 linebackers that I think you could trust right now. And I say that as somebody who likes Quay Walker, but Quay is certainly not a consistent player at this point in his career. Isaiah McDuffie, anytime he's played any extended snaps, has gotten dinged. So, that's a difficult thing to put your trust in. The other guys on the roster are special teamers. Linebacker certainly one. I think the entire secondary, corner, safety, they could use either one. There's one player that I know everybody's going to kind of roll their eyes at when I say it, but to me, when we get to this first round, there really is a player to me that just solves so many problems. And sometimes the obvious pick is obvious for a reason.
Do you want to say it, or do you want me to do the honors?
With a shout out to my favorite little niece. Her name is Aiden, and her last name is Feltz, and her real name is actually Grace. But I call her Aiden because she was named after Aiden Hutchinson in my brain, at least. But no, Cooper DeJean from Iowa. And I know, whether that's as the nickel corner, whether that's as the safety. I had a friend say once that Gutekunst basically couldn't hide his erection when talking about him in his press conference on Monday. And I think there's some truth to that. But again, somebody told Bill Huber before the draft process started that before free agency started, that the perfect safety tandem for Green Bay was Xavier McKinney and Cooper DeJean. I think the Packers have a chance to do that. I don't know if Cooper can play outside corner consistently in the NFL, but as a nickel corner, I like Keyshawn Nixon. I don't think he's a long-term answer at that position. And as another safety, again, this safety class reeks, man. There's not a whole lot of good things I have to say about it. And, the early guy, some intel from a friend I know and somebody you guys know and somebody that would know more than me says they really like Tyler Nubin. Would they take him at 25? I don't know. That would fly in the face of a lot of things they have done, but friend of mine seems to think that they might. So I'd be surprised about that. But to me, like I said, sometimes there's like last year, we all talked ourselves out of it, but the obvious pick for Green Bay at 13 was Lucas Van Ness. The most obvious Packer that ever Green Bay Packered was Lucas Van Ness at that spot. And when they moved from 15 to 13, Aaron Nagler said, I feel like they're targeting Van Ness with that move up. New England had him in for a pre-draft visit. There was some interest there from the Patriots. Obviously, the Patriots like players like that too. It's as simple to me. And then when they took Van Ness, everyone's like, oh my God, they didn't take the receiver. I'm like, yeah, no duh. They took the 6'6", 270-pound freak athlete from Iowa that's a pass rusher.
Where have you been? Right. Of course, where have you been?
And you know what? Van Ness, I still think, is going to be a stud with a shout out to Iowa Joe here. So I'm excited for who Van Ness is and how he finished the season, what he's going to be as a second-year player. But I do think that DeJean is the same player in that similar ilk. Now, does that mean they'll pick him? I don't know. I think that there's a lot of other options. I do have actually an official prediction if you want to do that at the end of the show for who I think they'll pick tomorrow night or Thursday night. So I'll save that for the end. But again, a guy who, when you talk about needs and things they fit, DeJean potentially solves two of them. And I think that he is, and as a punt returner, Green Bay might need one of those too. Jaden Reed's a big part of their offense. Keyshawn's a big part of their defense. Maybe they need another guy who can return kicks. So keeping a guy like that around can't hurt either.
Yeah, make sure you hold on to the Tyler Nubin discussion for tomorrow's 19-hour special edition of the show when we talk about draft thresholds. But in terms of the players who are available in the positions of need, look, I understand the DeJean thing. I know our buddy, maybe you're so more than mine, but Jason Perrone, who I have a lot of respect for his opinions. Maybe you don't. I don't know. I
have a lot of respect for Jason's beautiful girlfriend, Elaine, and that's about it.
But I know he has been on the I don't want Cooper DeJean, I think more so than anything because I'm just sick of hearing about him. And look, I get it. I totally understand, but I also think you're right. It's almost an Occam's razor kind of thing. Sometimes the best explanation is just the simplest one. His skills, and he might bust. You can look at these guys on paper and say, oh yeah, perfect fit, but then they bust. They don't work out in the NFL for any number of reasons. That will be determined 3 years from now, or maybe even more soon than that. But in terms of on paper, what you've seen from college, the athletic testing, all of that, he is a great fit. I think I would say, just generally speaking, in terms of safety, nickel, outside corner, whatever, you need secondary playmakers. Because right now you have two. I think Jair is one. I think Xavier McKinney is one. But by the same token, we've never seen Xavier McKinney play in this defense. We've never seen him suit up in the green and gold and maybe soon white helmet. We've never seen him play for Jeff Hafley before.
Please don't. Please don't. I don't want to sound like the old man yelling at a cloud, but
that's fine. That's fine. We'll get to that on a future.
Oh my
episode.
God.
But anyway, we don't know what that is going to look like yet. It's a lot of projection at this point. So some sort of secondary playmaker, whether it's corner, nickel, safety, whatever type of safety, whatever. I think that is a major need. I'm with you on linebacker. I don't know exactly where you're going to end up taking one. You got to get some linebacker help this year. As much as I liked what McDuffie did at the end of last year in 4 minutes he was forced into, but you're right. I mean, he gets banged up all the time. Offensive line is right there at the top for me. I know that's where you started, and that's where I'll finish here. We're very much in agreement anywhere. I don't think any one position, I would say to me, 2 players need to be on the starting offensive line next year. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be where they played this past year. Elgton Jenkins, Big E, I want him at left guard. Like, I would prefer to keep him where he has had the most success, the most consistency. I know he's moved all over the line in his career. I would like him to stay at left guard because he is a very, very good interior lineman on that left side. Zach Tom, right tackle, very good. I am, if the long-term plan is Zach Tom is your right tackle, and when he gets his next contract, that's where he'll be too. Honestly, cool. I'm cool with that.
Do you buy that center intel?
I was just about to get to that. If the Packers believe that his best position is center, then move him there and take 2 tackles this year. I am in the position, honestly, Jacob, where I admit I'm not in Green Bay. I am not in the building. I have not talked to Brian Gutekunst or to Adam Stenavich or Luke Butkus or anyone else. I don't know. I think Zach Tom could be a very good NFL center. I mean, shoot, that's what he did last thing at Wake Forest before coming into the draft, if I remember correctly. I would not be surprised at all if the Packers still think that is his best position, but they have used him at tackle because he is still the best option at tackle. The Packers historically, at least in recent history, have been willing to do things like that. Remember inside linebacker Clay Matthews? That was not his best position, but because of injuries and just being bereft of talent, they had to put him in that position. Maybe that's what they've done with Zach Tom. I don't know. Again, I'm super content if he's a right tackle going forward because at the bare minimum, he is a very good, nailed-on starter caliber right tackle. If he's a Hall of Fame center in the waiting, fine. That's a discussion that we can have when training camp rolls around and when week 1 rolls around. And again, maybe that's a discussion we have next week after the draft happens and the Packers go out there and they take, somebody in the first round and then pick 41, they say, you know what? We also love Kingsley Suamataia, and we're going to take 2 tackles in the top 50. I don't know. I'm not in the business of knowing those things. If I was, I'd be wearing a suit, and I'd be in Green Bay, Wisconsin right now. Instead, I'm in a basement in Topeka, Kansas. That's essentially the position I'm in. But those, to kind of circle around back to the original point, though, those are the 2 guys that have to be on this offensive line. Anyone else? You want to give me someone else? I'll tease the segment from later. The KU player was talking about. You want to tell me Dominic Pooney at the end of round 2 or early in round 3 is going to start at guard next year? Great. Awesome. You want to tell me Bartolini from Wisconsin is the next future center for this team? Awesome. Great. Sounds good. I just want more talent. I don't think anyone else, any of the other 3 spots, so not including Jenkins, not including Tom, are so good that you cannot replace them. That includes Myers, who the Packers really hyped up at the end of the season, said he was playing some of his best football. I think any of those guys are decent enough to start. I also think they can be replaced. I don't know what word specifically I'm looking for there, but they're not so good that they cannot be replaced. And I hope and I assume that is how the Packers are going to approach this year's draft. So let's go right away then to pick round 1, number 25 overall. Packers are going to possibly be on the clock. Maybe this is a trade spot. We already had our guy True North in the YouTube comments say trade out of 25. I don't know if that's trade up. You've got the ammunition to go up and get someone. Maybe, Jacob, you say, hey, look, we don't think Cooper DeJean is going to get past insert pick here. Don't pick 21, whatever. So we're going to move up to 20 and do it. They've got the ammunition to do that. Gutekunst also said something this week where he said, I'd love to get 13 or 14 picks. So you move back from 25. I can imagine, depending on who's there, there's a certain team I cover for my day job who's picking 32nd overall, who desperately needs an offensive tackle or a wide receiver. Maybe they say, hey, Green Bay, will you move back to 32? We'll throw in something. We'll throw in some sweeteners, get you to move back 7 spots. I don't know. I think the Packers, based on having multiple needs, but also a very flexible roster, have a whole lot of options here Who would be your top targets? Who are the guys you think we've already talked about Cooper DeJean. I think everyone agrees skill set wise, he makes sense there if he falls to that spot. Who are some of the guys, though, in this general area that you think would make the most sense for Green Bay?
Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from Texas A&M, is certainly one. If they're going to take a linebacker early, I think that's the one. I think somebody compared him to Quay Walker, which, I mean, they loved Quay. Obviously, They took him 22nd overall just 2 seasons ago. So I could picture them really liking him. I think that there's a couple options. The edge rusher class here has some interesting ways to shake just because there isn't that Myles Garrett, Will Anderson, name your Aiden Hutchinson star pass rusher that way. But there are some solid guys, but somebody could fall. Someone like Jared Verse from Florida State would be a guy that if he were to drop, I wouldn't hesitate at all. To me, there's no such thing as too many pass. If they're going to take a line of scrimmage player on either side of the ball, I'm not going to be upset with that at all. That's just how I'm wired. That's how I think you win in the NFL, along with quarterback play, obviously with the Chiefs. You set up Patrick Mahomes, so that's a nice start for them to have. Graham Barton, the offensive lineman out of Duke. I also, again, a friend, someone you guys know, has told me that the Packers will not let Graham Barton's arm length be the reason they don't let him play tackle. So he wouldn't say whether or not they think he can play tackle. So he didn't say that one way or the other, but that would be interesting on something like that. I know Amarius Mims, Tyler Guyton are some names that have been bantered about quite a bit. I think that there's some possibilities for them to find an offensive tackle in that spot. Whoever that Troy Fautanu from Washington, national runner-up Washington. Shout out to Brendan Rupp for that one in particular. I think that, that's where that kind of starts. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy I know that they had on a pre-draft visit, which leads you to believe there's some interest there.
His name is also Kool-Aid,
which is hilarious for so many
awesome
reasons.
Rules.
Yeah. So Byron Murphy, if he were to fall, but everything I'm reading today says he might be the first defender off the board. So that strikes me as like, okay, that's not happening. Johnny Newton from Illinois, that could certainly be something that they do. And I know defensive tackle would probably be like going like, really, a defensive tackle? It's like, well, Kenny's on an expiring deal. Slayton's on an expiring deal. Are you sure Devontae Wyatt's good? Are we sure Colby Wooden was Colby Wooden anything last year? And Carl Brooks, shout out to Brendan for loving Carl Brooks, but he's tiny. So are things going to change here in the future for him as well? I think I've covered just about everyone that I could find that I could have taken today. But Iowa Joe says today that something Tom Silverstein, I think, was writing that a potential surprise first rounder could be Junior Colson, the linebacker from Michigan. So I want to note it. I did not bring him up. That was brought up by someone else for me. So I will take what you give me in that regard.
Pelissero at NFL Network said the same thing.
Or was it Pelissero? I'm sorry. Maybe it was Pelissero.
Different Tom. But yeah, no, it was his annual guys who could sneak in, which is these agents wanted me to leak this information to the public. But yeah, Junior Colson was the most surprising one on that list for sure.
Yeah, and Schrager had the Packers taking Amarius Mims a week ago. So I think Green Bay's preference is going to be like what we're thinking as far as offensive tackle, defensive back, and then I'll save my prediction for later as to what I would do. But again, with the Packers, I don't have any reservations. If you want to tell me that they took Jackson Powers Johnson, the center from Oregon, cool. I'm down. I don't get that wrapped up. And I understand some positions are more important than others. I understand all that stuff. I don't get too wrapped up in that shit because at the end of the day, the whole point of this is to draft a good player. And the Packers need more of those. And they need more of those in certain spots, certainly. And some a little more valuable and maybe a little more important again than others. But I'm not going to be like they can't take Graham Barton if he's a guard. Well, why not? Like the Colts took Quentin Nelson, and he's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that the point? Like, isn't that the whole point? But whatever. So I think I went through most of the people that you could see them target in that area. I I will tell you this when we get into later rounds, but Austin Booker, man, I'm intrigued. We can talk about him in a little while, but I'm intrigued if nothing else.
Yeah, we'll get to him for sure in a group of some guys we'll try to sell each other on. But no, I mean, you hit most of the high points. Again, I'll just say his name one more time. If DeJean is there, that's a win. I love his skill set in this defense. And again, it's all projection, but what I think this defense is supposed to look like next to McKinney, would love that. Or if he ends up being your slot corner, fine, hybrid player, whatever, would love that. In terms of the players you mentioned, the guys that stand out the most to me, I think, emotionally gotten to a point where Barton is my guy, and I'll just tease you that right now because I don't foresee DeJean getting to 25, who I think would be ideal. I think Barton is my guy. I love linemen who can play in multiple spots, and I'm in agreement with you. If you can play, you can play. And, if you were a 5'10 offensive lineman who had short arms, yeah, I'm not putting you at tackle, but I mean, he's big enough, he's talented enough. I would be comfortable enough putting him at tackle. And even if he's only a guard, okay, great. Then you have a really good pair of guards. That's really valuable. I am all in long-term thinking on getting as much strength on the offensive line as possible. I hope multiple offensive linemen get picked, guys who can compete for starting jobs. And honestly, when we get to the end of day 3, depth guys. I already mentioned the Chiefs. You know what the Chiefs had that was really valuable down the stretch this year? Backup depth that was actually playable. You know who didn't play down the stretch in very important playoff games? All-pro first-teamer Joe Thuney due to an injury. And you know what the Chiefs had? They had Nick Allegretti, former 7th-round pick out of Illinois, who, is he great? No. Is he even good? That's certainly debatable. But you know what he is? He's playable. And in major moments down the stretch, like, I don't know, Super Bowl 58, they plugged in this veteran backup interior lineman. He had a great game. He was really, really good in the latter stretch of the postseason this past year. So I hope the Packers take multiple offensive linemen. And honestly, Barton's the guy that I'm most interested in. Versus who you brought up, the defensive end or edge rusher, however you want to specifically describe him, whatever he would look like in this defense. Based on need, I don't know that you trade up to go get that guy. Gary is around long-term. Van Ness is around long-term. Not worried about Preston. That's probably just one more year, although I do love Preston Smith. You know that. I love Verse. I love his game. I know Dallas Turner and Latu from UCLA are generally considered the best edge players in this draft. If Verse fell down around that 20 or later mark, that is a player I would love to have in Green Bay. I think he's extremely talented. Love his game. Love what we saw from him at Florida State this past year. And I know Nealand is another guy who has come up a lot. I've mostly have seen him from, post-season tape after the college football season, but I like what I've seen from him. I want to emphasize the interior. That is, unless the perfect fit, which is the little guy from Iowa, he's not that little, but the Iowa defensive back, if he's not there, I want emphasis in the middle, and I want it on the line of scrimmage. That is the hope for me, because that's where you win. You can talk about the sexy picks. You can talk about, you need this or more weapons or whatever. Dude, go protect Jordan Love, because the best thing for a still young quarterback, even though he's going into what's going to be year 5, he's still young. He was a really young prospect when he came out. He's still a young quarterback. He only has 1 full year of starting experience. The best way to make sure those guys have continued success and repeatable success, keep them upright. Don't allow them to be buried under the defensive line constantly, because if you want to go back, and this is fairly anecdotal, but also I think there's plenty of proof of this, some of the times when he struggled the most this past year was when the offensive line was struggling. Keep him upright. Barton is my guy, but honestly, man, there are so many different options. This is a good offensive line draft, especially at the top in those first couple of rounds. That is where I would want to emphasize. So whether it's Barton, if the Packers think Mims is a guy, I don't necessarily think so. I'm not a huge Guyton fan either, but I trust this team because they have gotten it right with the offensive line far more often than they have gotten it wrong. After the first round, where the Packers really start to get that depth, 2 picks in the second round, 2 picks in short order in the third round, and then obviously a bunch of picks on day 3 as well when you start getting into the real draft guide writer, nerd stuff, which I know you have a lot more experience with that than the average fan or the average media member. Who are some of your guys who are, and we'll sell each other on a prospect a little bit later, but who are some of the guys who really stand out, especially in that day 2 range when the Packers are even if they don't move around, are going to have so many options and so many bites at the apple. Who are some of the guys that really stand out to you, whether it's fit, whether it's talent, who you really think are good fits for this team?
Yeah, I'll start with Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas. That's if you're going to go the sexy quote unquote option. I certainly think that's one that Green Bay could look at because they have Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon in tow already. That means they could afford to wait on someone like Brooks, who probably is the number one running back in this class with a bullet, if not for an injury that knocked him out at the end of the season last year. So that's certainly a guy in that spot. Kieran, and I'm going to try and say his last name, like Armagaji.
Yes, Amagaji, I believe is what it is.
So I'm hoping the Packers don't pick him because I don't want to have to learn how to spell his name consistently as I'm writing. But I do think he's intriguing, and that upside play is a big one in the second round for something like that as well. TJ Tampa is a name that has kind of surfaced a little bit from Iowa State. I know that's a guy that some people have liked. Cole Bishop is a name for a guy after round one as well, for somebody to do some of those things. And then not just because of where he went to school, although, he went to the greatest college football program in the land, as the 2024 season might have told you, but Chris Jenkins.
UW Green Bay?
Yeah. They've never lost a football game. I can promise you that. Chris Jenkins has the bloodline. Obviously he played, or his dad played. Him. His dad played, his uncle played, his Uncle Colin played here in Green Bay for a while as well. But Jenkins is somebody to me that can kind of be the guy to fill some of the gaps of the stuff that they don't have. Do they have a guy who can just be a dominant run defender with some pass rush upside? I think the mutant, as they call him, could certainly be one of those guys. And there's others that I'm sure I'm missing and forgetting a couple or something to that effect. But I definitely think those are some of the names. And then the last one is Jerrion Jones from Florida State. I really like his potential as a slot corner at the next level. And again, I think the way Green Bay needs to treat that position has to change just a little bit, just because like Trent McDuffie is one of Kansas City's best defenders, and he's a slot corner that they used a first round pick on. So I think there's some benefit to doing some stuff like that, but that is definitely that little list, if you will, of my guys that I like after that. And there are others, but you guys don't want to sit here for an hour listening to me talk about a bunch of dudes.
I mean, we are doing a draft preview show after all. You mentioned TJ Tampa, who I saw a lot of in college playing for Iowa State and being, covering other Big 12 schools. Have seen a lot of TJ Tampa play. I like his game a lot. This, as you mentioned, this safety class sucks. I mean, it is the 2024 NBA draft of NFL position groups in the NFL draft. I mean, it is so bereft of talent up and down. There are so few players. That's why DeJean is something of a unicorn in this class. I know we keep mentioning him, but there's just so little talent there. I know the Auburn kid, who I think is a day 3 kind of option, he's not bad. Jalen, and I wish Stevenson, is that it? Jalen Stevenson? I'm trying to remember up.
Jaden Hicks, but
I got to look it up because I need to remember. But anyway, there's a little bit scattered about day 3. I like TJ Tampa, though. I don't know how he's going to translate to the NFL. I did like him in college. I know that for certain. I know he's got good game speed. He's got great instincts, well coached at Iowa State. That is, as much as I like to make fun of Matt Campbell and his staff, he is well coached. That defense has been well coached. There's not a lot of well coached players for a long time. I like TJ Tampa's game. The other one, and I think if I remember correctly, Jacob, your boy Jake Morley brought this name up earlier on in the draft process. Dadrian Taylor Demerson from Texas Tech, another Big 12 guy. Really like the way that he plays, and he really stood out more as we got into this draft process. As I went back and watched some Texas Tech film, really enjoyed the way he played. Again, I think an instinctual player, decent size. That's another one that day 2, if you go get a safety, and the Packers do need safety help, let's be blunt about this, whether it's DeJean or someone else, you've got to go get something, some sort of competition for Anthony Johnson coming up this year in the safety room. That's a player I like. I like Taylor Demerson a lot. So those are the guys who day 2-ish safety class. I mean, I would not reach for anyone in this class just to fill a need because yuck, it is ugly. But those are the two that I think stand out in that regard. Other players, I mean, this could be the guy who I try to, sell you on later. I keep bringing up his name. Dominic Pooney from KU, man. He is a dog, and he is the exact kind of player I think almost any team in the NFL could use a piece like him. He's got maybe not full 5-position versatility. He played tackle at KU the last 2 years and didn't allow a sack. And we're talking Big 12 here. This is not exactly not allowing a sack at, directional Michigan or something. I mean, he was playing against good defensive linemen. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com. I know he was hyped up on another KU guy in Austin Booker. He had nice things to say about Dominic Pooney as well. He played tackle. He's probably a little too small, physically speaking, to play there in the NFL. I think he's going to be a guard at the next level. He is nasty, though. D2 guy originally, started at Central Missouri, which, by the way, this past year is the school that had the D2 Heisman winner, the Harlan Hill Award winner, Zach Zabrowski, whose dad, offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Kansas. Look at the way all these things tie together. But Pooney's tough. He's a road grader. He's a good pass blocker. He, again, has good instincts. He's athletic enough. He's got the broad jump threshold that, at least my understanding of what the Packers normally like, he meets a lot of those standards. Not fast if you care about things like 40-time, 10-yard splits, anything like that in terms of athletic testing. I like him a lot. I think he's the kind of guy who could compete pretty quickly, honestly, for that right guard spot at KU. So he's none that stands out. A couple other offensive players that I really like. I love Troy Franklin, man. I don't know what the Packers are going to look at in terms of wide receivers. I don't know how important that is going to be for Green Bay this year. I really like Troy Franklin. Again, a guy who didn't test crazy fast or anything. But if you go back and watch Oregon, and some of it is scheme, I understand that. It's hard to project college film to what they can do in the NFL. Troy Franklin is always making plays. I just loved watching that dude play at Oregon. He's one of the wide receivers who really stands out to me. I like Luke McCaffrey as well. I know that's a super, oh, wow, you picked a McCaffrey. Really dove deep into that one. He put on some good film at Rice, man. There's something there. He's a slot. That he is not playing outside. And as well as anybody, Jacob, my Packers' preference for the slot is Christian Watson. I wish Christian Watson was just your power slot going forward. McCaffrey is your more traditional, scrappy, lunch pail, first in, last out, white.
Son of a coach.
Literally, yes, but son of a player as well. But no, he's a guy who I would like. And when we're talking day 3, we're talking 6th or 7th round, take a flyer on a guy. He's an interesting piece to me. Running back wise, another Oregon player. I love Bucky Irving, another one who I just loved watching in college. Probably has some physical limitations. He's a little slighter of build, but I do love his game. Will Shipley from Clemson, I think, is an interesting one if you wanted to take a running back at some point. Again, you're talking probably 4th, 5th round for Shipley. Maybe someone reaches in the 3rd. I like his game a whole lot. And then one other one, and I'll give you another Big 12 player here, and he's a guy who I've covered for years. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. He is a player
baby. I love that dude. Josiah DeGuara, but so juiced up.
Josiah DeGuara, but you actually are cool throwing him the ball. I think that's essentially what Ben Sinnott is. And he's going to be an interesting case. Whoever he ends up in the NFL going forward, are you going to use him as more of a Y? Do you want him essentially as a big slot guy? Are you going to play him as more of an H-back? Essentially, if you're trying to project what would he be for Matt LaFleur and this Packers offense, go look at what Josiah DeGuara did, but then picture a player who's going to make a bigger contribution. Like, that's essentially what I think Ben Sinnott could end up being. He's not huge. He's not a big body tight end. Again, I think he'll be more of a hybrid player in the NFL. But those are some of the offensive guys that really stand out to me. I like Sinnott, man. I think he's a good player. I think the other K-Stater who's in the draft this year, Cooper Beebe, the offensive lineman, so many varying takes on him and what he can be at the next level. Again, I think he's a guard more than anything else. He doesn't have great measurables in terms of, I think it was arm length. Again, that was the knock on him. You want to talk about a dog. That dude is going to beat your ass, and he's going to beat it all up and down the field for 100 yards. I don't know what the Packers think of in terms of his size, his intangibles. That one, you don't have to be a tape expert. You don't have to have gone through the scouting academy or anything to see that dude and know he is going to kick your ass. So that's another one. Those two K-State guys I think are very interesting. And again, There's no bias there because I went to the University of Kansas. So there's no inherent bias in talking about either of those two guys. But offensively, those are the guys that really jump off the page to me. And whatever the Packers are looking for in terms of playmaker, I think any of those would be a win.
Yeah, Cooper Beebe, man. It's funny because, we talk about types and thresholds and what are the other buzzwords that some of these guys touch themselves to. I don't know all of them, but we talk about all those things throughout the process here. And Cooper Beebe is somebody who actually fits almost all of them. I think, I don't remember the exact. Jake Morley has the tier 1 Packer thing that he goes throughout the course of time. And Cooper Beebe, he's built like an air fryer is I believe the way Ross Uglum described him, but Beebe fits because he has 2 years experience of playing tackle. I think he could play guard or center. I think he could start at guard or center for this team in 2024. I really like, and I know the way the Packers have done things in the offensive line, and who the hell am I to argue with the success that they've had at those positions? Because they certainly have. But sometimes I am a little more traditional as far as, especially on interior offensive linemen. Yes, I want the guy who can move, but I also want the guy who I need a yard and he's going to smack. So watch the Rose Bowl and watch the way the line of scrimmage when Michigan is against Alabama move. It's a 4th and 1 and it just moves backwards 4 yards because they're just running behind Drake Nugent and Trevor Keegan. And Zach Zinner wasn't even there. That's another guy who I could certainly add to this list as a guy the Packers had on a pre-draft visit. It was probably mostly a medical thing, but a nail-spitting, smash your face into the dirt, ass-kicking guard is kind of in center too, to some degree. Jason Kelce is one of my favorite players ever. He's smaller, so it doesn't quite fit that mold, but guys like that. And I don't know that Green Bay has enough players and hasn't had enough players like that, especially when you get into short yardage situation and can I run behind this guy for a yard? I think you can run behind Elton for a yard, but who else? That's kind of the tough part on some of that stuff. But Cooper Beebe, I love that. I didn't mention Austin Booker. I wasn't quite sure where we were going after this, but I like Austin Booker. The comp to Max Crosby had me perk my ears up a little bit because it's this is a guy that you don't have to draft in the first round. I personally would not see it as excess if the Packers took a first-round pass rusher, but some people might say that's not the best use of the resources. So if you can grab Booker, and I do think one of my running theories that I have is that the Packers or any team in general, when they have extra picks in the early rounds, they'll do stuff with those picks they may not normally do. So in 2022, for example, they had those 2 first-rounders. Whether it's the linebacker or the older prospect, whichever one, they did something in that first round that they may not have normally done. When they had 2 first-round picks, they did that for Darnell Savage as well. Is that something they would have normally done? I don't know. But the ability to take 5 picks in the top 100 and find a smaller edge, Gutekunst has always said he doesn't want to get smaller because you can get small in a hurry in this league, and you really can. And the Packers have preferred bigger players as their pass rushers. But the Max Crosby comp, like I said, kind of perked my ears up a little bit. I think Crosby is awesome. Having watched him play for as long as I have, pass rushers is kind of my thing. So he's certainly on my list of guys that I really like watching do that kind of stuff. That's one guy. If you wanted to throw a receiver in there, and again, roll your eyes, whatever. But Cornelius Johnson's a guy who has athletic upside, special teams experience, and I think there's untapped potential there as a receiver. Everybody that, as we've gone through this process, it's really been used to kind of nitpick at JJ McCarthy. But the way Michigan's offense was run really was they all had guys set to do very specific roles and do certain things. And I don't know how you argue with the results at 15-0. That's their job, is to win in college. And they did do that. So once you get to the NFL, though, I do think it's interesting at least to monitor. Johnson has some former 4-star recruit, high-level athlete. There might be some untapped potential there to where, can he beat out Malik Heath and Grant DeBose and Bo Melton and some of those guys at the back end of that receiver room roster? I'd be interested to see something like that.
The thing with Austin Booker, let's just get there right away, because I don't know if I'm an expert, but I have seen him play. I saw every snap of his college career at Kansas because, well, that's the team that I cover and the team that I care about. If you are feeling like I need someone who is bigger or, this is an excess pick. You made the comparison there to Max Crosby, and I know we collaborated. Well, you asked me a couple questions for a piece over at Packers Central about Booker because he came in on a top 30 visit. You want motor, right? When I look at this Packers defense, and something that it has been missing for a long time, we talked about this a lot during the season, man, especially when things were really in the doldrums in the middle and moving into the back half of the season, about the culture of the defense, and that more than anything, more than scheme, more than people, you had to adjust that. This is a team that has played slow for a long time, and I don't know how much fire there has been in the defense. And I think individually we've seen it. Jair Alexander's a fiery player, but you've needed a little bit more of that. I want a dude who is going to go off the edge and is going to give you 110% on every snap. And Booker is a one-year wonder. And there's a lot of projection in making sure, do you think he's going to be a contributor right away? Is it a long-term thing? He's slight of build. He's got to bulk up at the NFL level. He didn't play at all, hardly, at Minnesota. Transferred to Kansas, immediately became the best player on the KU defense. KU defense that, by the way, had some pretty nice players on it. Jacoby Bryant next year is going to be a player who I think the NFL is going to be very interested in. A couple of other guys on that defense, too, who at least are going to generate some interest. But Booker has great pass rush moves for a guy who has played very little. He's got intensity. He's really smart. I don't know if you often think of guys, and not you specifically, but when we talk about smart players, who do you think? You think of tackles, you think of quarterbacks, you think of safeties. You don't often think like, oh yeah, this edge guy. Normally the general stereotype is, yeah, pin your ears back, see ball, get ball. But Booker, if you go back and watch the game against Illinois, this really stands out. It was KU's second game of the year. It was a Friday night. And there are a couple of times where you see him take these what look to be circuitous routes to the quarterback that actually are the best routes to get there. It's patient. It is reserved. It is knowing exactly when he's got to hit a hole, when he has to hit the jets, et cetera, et cetera. He's a hell of a player. And I would not take him first round. I don't know that I would take him second round because I do think there's some bulking up that has to do. But with you got 2 third-round picks, number 91, you got that second, third-round pick. If you want to take a big swing on a player, that's the kind of guy I want. And maybe he doesn't end up being Booker, but I agree with you totally. If you've got the extra picks and you're not using them as, cannon fodder to move up and make a bigger move, go take a swing. Go try to add high upside. And I think Booker's that kind of guy. Who are you far from the consensus on? Who is your guy who you feel like you are so far away from everybody else? And I guess that could be a positive or a negative.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess it's hard to say because in my world, I look at everything I see is through the lens of like what the Packers could do, or what they won't do or what they won't, who they won't touch or anything to that effect. As far as guys I like, is this early, late, whatever, I would draft Amarius Mims, for example, if that were an option. I'm at least intrigued by the potential upside there, but I don't think that's straying too terribly far from consensus on anything like that. Blake Corum is a guy who I kind of push back on the heavy workload and not explosive thing. If you watch Corum's last 4 games, he looked a lot more like the guy pre-injury than post-injury. So I think there's something to that there. And a guy that, again, if you can get him in the third round or later, that I feel like you'd be comfortable handing the keys to the backfield too. I think they, again, wasn't asked to do as much stuff other than just smash your face in that offense, but certainly capable of doing more things. I'm trying to rack some guys through the top of my brain here as far as like what that could mean as far as players off of consensus or something like that. I guess Austin Booker is one. I would take him in the third round. I don't think there would be any or much hesitation on something like that. Michael Hall is somebody I think that's going like, here's a Buckeye, but he's going like third round or later in some of these mock draft simulations. I would not be surprised if the Packers pick him at 41 or that some team takes him in the top 50 just because high pedigree player, pass rush, and just a defense. Again, there are certain positions in the draft industrial complex, to use, I believe that's a Cheesehead TV thing, but just to use their ism, or whoever it is that came up with that, kudos. It's funny to me. But there are positions that get overvalued by them, and there are positions that get undervalued. So most of that group undervalues like defensive linemen, interior off positions that they just are hard to watch and frankly, quote unquote, kind of boring, whereas receivers get over it. Like to me, just as an example here in the Chicago area, everybody wants the Bears to take Caleb Williams and then trade up for Marvin Harrison or draft a receiver at 9 or whatever that is.
Roma Dunze. Yeah.
Sure. And I was like, Olu Fashanu. Without blinking, I would take Olu Fashanu if I was Chicago. Left tackle. I want my quarterback protected for the foreseeable future. And that's what I'm trying to get with Caleb Williams. And Caleb doesn't exactly play this structured brand of football. So having him protected, I think, is going to be a big deal as well. But Michael Hall is somebody I think that's undervalued and this happens every year, right? Like the year that Rashawn Gary got drafted, Brian Burns was a guy who like everyone in Twitter world, if you will, was in love with and myself included, no question there. But like everyone's like, oh, he's the best edge rusher after Nick Bosa. Like he should be one of the first, and he got picked like 16th or something like that, which not nothing to sneeze at there, but like it wasn't a top 5 player with a bullet kind of thing either. Because when you say like, oh, he can't defend the run, but I don't really care about that. Well, NFL teams do. They absolutely care about whether or not you can play all 3 downs.
Yeah, that's significant. I'll give you one, by the way. This has nothing to do with the Packers. They're not taking a first-round quarterback and certainly not one in the top 3. I am
Michael.
My
Penix.
caveat when I talk about the draft is always I'm not rooting against anyone. Like I might not think someone is a great prospect or is going to be a great fit somewhere, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope all these dudes make millions and have long careers, etc. I'm not rooting against anyone. That being said, not Packers related. I don't see it with Jaden Daniels at all. Like I don't get it. I have not been able to get it out of my head that I saw a reply on Twitter the other day that said skinny Justin Fields with a worse arm. And and then I see, well, Joe Burrow at LSU, he had all these receivers and talents and everything. Yeah, Joe Burrow was also a completely different kind of quarterback who actually valued his body and didn't run his skinny little frame directly into oncoming freight trains constantly. I think he's a better thrower of the football too. And again, I hope Jaden Daniels has a great career. I am not rooting against the guy, but the notion that Jaden Daniels is going to get taken before Drake May, to be completely honest, is like ludicrous to me. And maybe May doesn't work out either. It's certainly possible he doesn't. There's things that I can understand why they might scare you off. But like if I'm Washington, if I'm Adam Peters, their new GM, and I have to make a quarterback pick, like I'm taking Drake May, and I'm taking that before the clock hits 9:59 when we're on the clock. Like I'm not even thinking twice about it.
I mean, I would take Drake if I was Ryan Poles. So
really?
Yeah, I do. I think Caleb Williams is awesome, and I think he's going to be good. But I also think that there are going to be some really ugly moments, and there are some things about him. Like if Jacob Morley said to me a while ago, like if we look back on it, show me one play Caleb Williams has made in structure. And like, it kind of makes some sense. Like, I can't. Right. Which isn't to say he can't. And it isn't to say that like, oh, it's bad that he only makes plays out of structure, because obviously making plays off structure is a big deal. That's part of what, has made Aaron Rodgers great for as many years as he's been great. And Jordan Love, even now, like one of his best plays of the season last year was out of structure. Just looking at that. But the Jaden Daniels thing is interesting because I do feel like the draft industrial complex, again, is making some of the same mistakes with Jaden Daniels that they made with Justin Fields. And what I mean with that is like there are so many of Justin Fields' flaws that even now, still, after he's been given up on and traded for a ham sandwich, that aren't being discussed. And it's similar that way with Jaden Daniels. Now, I do think Daniels will have a good career. I'm a little worried for him if he ends up in Washington. Maybe that's just PTSD because it's Washington.
I get it.
But if I were you, or if I were Adam Peters or whatever, yes, I would be saying that my quarterback is Drake May before the clock hits. What'd you say? 9:59. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Great example this year of helmet scouting, by the way. Like I have a coworker who I value his opinion a lot, but he said, I don't want Drake May because I just saw Sam Howell.
Mitchell Trubisky.
He's a Commanders fan. And I get it, but also Two very different players. We're short on time. Let's get to our actual picks. With the 25th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers will select or trade up for or trade down for
Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker from Texas A&M at pick number 25.
Spicy.
So 2 out of 3 years, they've taken a linebacker in the first round after I've been sworn up and down they would never do that.
So leaning into what you have been proven wrong on multiple times.
Yeah.
I get it. You and Freilich were talking about this on Twitter earlier today, weren't you not?
Yeah, he said pick 41. I don't know if Cooper's going to make it to 41. Some of the stuff that's being written today is like scouts saying he's one of the top 20 most talented players in the draft class, blah, blah, blah. Just stuff like that. He's not a finished product. This is not like drafting Luke Kuechly or something like that. If they were, he wouldn't be available at 25. It's just, to me, like, I get it. Everybody draws up in their head how this draft is going to go. Like, this player has to get picked here or he stinks. Or this, to me, like, the word value is relative. Like, it really is however you want to assign that. Yeah, I don't have a great example of that off the top of my head, but I think that Cooper is a guy who I'm not sure he's available when the Packers are on the clock at 41. And I just think with the way the shape of this draft is going to go, I think the offensive tackles will be mostly picked over by the time they get there. And the Packers, I have heard from the very start of this entire process that they love Edgerrin Cooper. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm certainly happy to do that. I would certainly not do anything like say that something was offered and then found to be inaccurate and then double down on that. But, you know, that is certainly a possibility of something that could happen, is that they do, or I was told they do like Edgerrin Cooper. And then it turns out that maybe not so much, or maybe not enough to take him at 25. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But yeah, my official prediction is Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker from Texas A&M.
You know what's more important than value? Talent, being a good football player. Right. If you want a more historical example, the Atlanta Falcons once moved up to number 6 in the draft and gave up multiple first-round picks to go get Julio Jones, which at the time was a lot of, well, yeah, I mean, Julio's awesome, but a wide receiver there.
A literal Hall of Famer.
He's going to the Hall of Fame in the, I would say for probably at least 2 years after Calvin Johnson stopped being at his peak, the best receiver in the NFL was Julio Jones, and they still went to a Super Bowl with him as the key part of their offense next to Matt Ryan.
Probably would have been the Super Bowl MVP if they could protect a 40-point lead or whatever that was.
Yeah, that go get good players. That matters more to me than anything else. And I get the value argument, and I'm sure at some point I will say something about this trade. Oh my God, we took a tight end with the first third-round pick instead of the 1-3 picks later. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's just being a fan. But I go get talent. That's what matters to me. That's what I care about. Go get talent. If it's not great value, if Edgerrin Cooper is the best player on the board, but you say, well, can't take him. Unfortunately, the corners are more valuable, so we have to reach for someone instead. No, that's dumb. That's very stupid, in my opinion. Go get the talent. Go get the best players available. That is why I think with the 25th pick, while I would not be surprised if the Packers moved up because they saw a guy they wanted and felt like they could move one of those thirds or even a second if they want to take a big jump, I do think it'll be Graham Barton. I think this team needs to continue emphasizing the offensive line. I love dudes who have positional versatility, legitimately can play anywhere along the line. I think Barton's got that. I like the talent. I like the power. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Protect Jordan Love. You're going to make, in the next couple of weeks, in all likelihood, a massive investment in Jordan Love to be the future of the franchise that, historically speaking, you play quarterback there for over a decade and then you get your number retired. Like that's the standard for quarterback in Green Bay, because it's going to happen to Rodgers. It happened to Favre. It happened to Starr. It happened way back in the 40s as well. That's the expectation for quarterbacks in Green Bay. So protect them. That's why I would go Graham Barton with that 25th pick. We appreciate you guys all for hanging out with us today on the show, talking NFL draft with us. I'm pumped. I am going to probably be as minimally online as I've been in a decade plus for the draft. I'm going to be with my best friends, including one of my best friends. It's his bachelor party weekend. We're going to stay in a cabin in Tennessee all weekend long, watching the draft together, hanging out. So I'm probably not going to be as online as I normally am, but you can bet I will be freaking out regardless. He's a Packers fan, so we're going to be, consoling each other one way or the other.
And then you're buying tickets to Metallica at Soldier Field, right?
That is the goal. August 11th, Soldier Field. That is indeed the goal. So I can finally go and see Jacob and headbang and thrash for the first time since I saw Metallica 9 years ago. That's the expectation. That's the hope.
Whoa, 9 years ago. Where'd you see them?
Lollapalooza, 2015.
Oh, sure. Of course. Okay, yeah. My first one was Soldier Field 6 years ago, and then I saw them at the Kohl Center. And then my biggest fear ever came to fruition.
The Kohl Center?
They did. And I could not find my car. I forgot where I parked.
Ew.
So I literally am walking the streets of Madison, thankful that it wasn't Chicago, because Madison's a little bit safer.
Little different, slightly different kind of venue. Oh my gosh. Well, we appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. Enjoy the draft. We will be back, I think, if I'm not mistaken. We had made plans for a post-draft recap as well.
I have nothing.
If not, we can now.
So, yeah, I would say I have nothing to do. So yeah, what do you need? When do you need me and where? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, we'll be here.
We will talk to you guys then after the draft with a lot of excitement. Obviously, hope springs eternal with the NFL draft. We'll talk to you then. For Jacob Westendorf, I am Brendan Brzezinski. Thank you for joining us for this special draft edition of the Pick Six.